Hey, fifth grade. Today we're looking at the Stamp Act of 1765. Your objective for this lesson, you will have an understanding of the Stamp Act and the role it had in leading to the Revolutionary War. But first, let's review. The road to the Revolution. The colonies unite. All right, so we started out earlier in the week with the French Indian War, Proclamation of 1763, the Sugar Act, and today we are at the Stamp Act. Let's review with the French and Indian War. All right, so the French and Indian War took place 1754 to 1763, and the war was between the British and the French colonies living in America. But because there were more British Americans, the French people relied on the local Native American people to help them as allies. This is why it's called the French and Indian War. The war started because France wanted control over the Ohio River area, but Britain was like, nah. So this turned into war, and right here you can see this is the Ohio River area that they wanted control of. Moving on to the Proclamation of 1763, review. This is old King George. Remember we talked about him a few weeks back? So this is the review of the Proclamation of 1763. The Proclamation of 1763 was issued October 7th, 1763 by King George III. After Great Britain gained French territory in North America at the end of the French and Indian War. The purpose of the proclamation was to organize Britain's large North American empire and to make relations with Native Americans better by controlling trade settlement and land purchases. The Sugar Act. The Sugar Act was aimed by ending the smuggling trade in sugar and molasses from the end of the Dutch West Indies. It was also meant to provide increased income for the British Empire, which had been enlarged following the French and Indian War. Molasses, just in case you didn't know, is a syrup made of sugar. Anything made of sugar is good. This is kind of what it looks like, and it sometimes comes in containers looking like this. Here we are, the Stamp Act. We've already talked about the Stamp Act too, but I wanted to go back and touch on that just a little bit. The Stamp Act law was passed by the British government in 1765. It meant that all legal documents and printed papers used in the American colonies had to have an official stamp. The result was that every piece of paper the colonists used was taxed by the British. The act was passed in England without asking the American colonies, which many colonists found unfair. And I have to be honest with you, I think that's unfair too. They were being taxed by a government that did not allow them to take part in political decisions. This was the first time that the British had taxed the colonies. The colonists were worried that it was the beginning of many more taxes. The Stamp Act. After the French and Indian War, England sent troops to remain in the colonies to defend against Indian attacks and to prevent the French from trying to reclaim the land that they had lost. Many people in England believed that the colonies should pay to help support these troops. After all, they were there to help the colonists. To support these troops, the British Parliament passed the Stamp Act in 1765. The Stamp Act required that a stamp purchased from the British government be placed on all important documents such as court papers, almanacs, pamphlets, newspapers, and even playing cards. Can you believe that? The special stamp showed that the tax had been paid on the paper item. The Stamp Act caused anger and resentment among the colonists. First, colonists were outraged that the British troops were stationed in the colonies at all and that they had to pay for their upkeep. Second, colonists believed that it was unfair to tax them when they had no representation in the Parliament. Representatives from 9 colonies met in New York in 1765 in a meeting called the Stamp Act Congress. They declared that the colonies should not be taxed by Parliament. The only taxation they could accept would have to come from the assemblies elected by colonists themselves. Ships arriving from England carrying the stamps were met by mobs who destroyed the stamps. Some ship captains were forced to return to England with the stamps. The resistance of the colonists to use the stamps caused many businesses to be able to operate. Parliament repealed the Stamp Act in 1766. Here we have the 1 penny stamp used under the Stamp Act of 1765. What you're going to do for me, boys and girls, answer the questions on each stamp. There's 6 questions. Answer those for me. And then the primary source detectives the repeal or funeral procession of the Stamp Act. And then, guess what? We're at the end. You're done. Ta-da!